I never envisioned myself as the kind of woman who would be taken aback by her own desires. I have always envisioned myself as a devoted wife and mother, a person who consistently makes the right decisions even in the face of adversity. Life possesses a remarkable ability to humble us, uncovering the depths of our own ignorance regarding who we truly are. This is the story of my betrayal, my husband, my family, and the shattering of everything I once held dear. A narrative woven with passion, desire, and the exhilarating peril of indistinct limits. It all began with an event I was never intended to observe. My name is Claire, and throughout the majority of my life I have been the steadfast woman upon whom everyone relies. My career was rewarding, my home a sanctuary, and my marriage, while not without its imperfections, felt resilient and enduring. Mark stood as my unwavering support. We have shared 2 decades of marriage. Though the initial excitement of our early days transformed into a comfortable rhythm, I never doubted his affection or fidelity. He was the one who never forgot anniversaries, who clasped my hand during films, and who consistently enveloped me in a sense of safety. That was my conviction at the very least. Following that, it was our son Jake's turn. He did not belong to us. At the age of 16, we welcomed him into our lives, following a long and arduous journey through infertility. Throughout his life, Jake navigated the shifting landscape of foster homes. Upon his arrival, he exuded a quiet demeanor, a reserved presence, profoundly impacted by the turmoil he had encountered. Mark and I sought to offer him the stability and affection he longed for, and for a while it seemed as though we were succeeding beautifully. Jake flourished into a self-assured and compassionate young man, and my pride in his transformation knows no bounds. With the passage of time, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. Jake was deeply intertwined with our lives. He was completely devoted to me. He followed me through the house, clinging to my every word as if he were a shadow. He would settle next to me on the couch, our legs brushing against each other, and I would feel an unexplainable flutter in my chest. I assured myself it was merely inconsequential. He was merely a boy, untouched by the warmth of a mother's affection, and I represented the nearest semblance of that love he had ever experienced. There was an unspoken depth in his fleeting glances, hinting at something hidden just beneath the surface. That look was not one a son ought to cast upon his mother. His eyes blazed with desire, a yearning that coiled within me, stirring guilt and an indescribable sensation. Mark noticed it too, yet chose to remain silent. He cast me sidelong looks whenever Jake was in the vicinity, his jaw tight, a simmering frustration lurking just beneath the surface. He was undeniably uneasy, yet he wrestled with the words, hesitant to voice his thoughts for fear of wounding Jake's feelings. We both pretended that all was well, even as the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly charged with unspoken tension. That night transformed the course of everything. On a balmy summer night, Mark was toiling away into the late hours. Following dinner, Jake made his way to his room, leaving me to confront the cleanup in the kitchen. The house lay shrouded in an unsettling stillness, a weighty hush that enveloped all within its walls. After finishing the dishes, I made my way to see how Jake was doing before settling in for the night. The door stood ajar. Soft strains of music drifted from within, barely audible yet inviting. I rapped gently, yet there was no response. I pushed the door open a little more and glanced inside, curious if he lay in slumber. The sight before me was utterly breathtaking. Jake reclined on his bed, his back turned to the door, unaware of my arrival. His shirt had vanished, and his jeans hung unbuttoned. By chance, I found myself observing an intimate scene that was never intended for my eyes. A whirlwind of shock, embarrassment, and an unnamed feeling surged within me, causing my breath to hitch. I ought to have turned on my heel, closed the door behind me, and pretended I had never laid eyes on any of it. I did not. I remained motionless, observing the frantic and desperate motions of Jake. In an instant, as though sensing my presence, he whirled around. Our gazes intertwined, and for a fleeting moment, time itself seemed to pause. Jake's cheeks flushed crimson as he jerked his hand away, hastily fumbling to fasten his jeans. A surge of guilt and shame washed over me, yet intertwined with it was an exhilarating thrill that coiled my stomach in tight knots. "Claire," Jake said, his voice trembling. "I was completely unaware of your presence here." Words eluded me. Thoughts surged through my mind, my heart thundering in my chest. I ought to have offered my apologies, to have urged him to let go of the past events. I remained rooted in place, gazing at him, my body revealing secrets I was unwilling to acknowledge. With unwavering resolve, I entered the room and closed the door firmly behind me. As I closed the door behind me, it struck me that there was no turning back now. Jake's room thrummed with vitality, the atmosphere charged and vibrant, as though the very walls were poised in anticipation. Jake perched on the edge of the bed, his face a deep shade of crimson, eyes alight with disbelief and a troubling emotion that churned in my gut. Claire, he whispered once more, his voice barely a sigh. I extend my sincerest apologies. Ah, it seems that was not intended for your gaze. I hesitated to respond at first. Thoughts surged through my mind, my heart thundering so fiercely that I was convinced he could hear it. I ought to have simply turned on my heel and exited the scene. I ought to have simply offered my apology and encouraged him to let it go. I did not. I moved in, my gaze fixed on his. It's all right, I murmured, my voice trembling. There's no requirement for an apology. Jake's eyes grew wide, mirroring the expression of a frightened child for just an instant as vulnerability washed over him, leaving him uncertain and yearning for reassurance. Yet, in an instant, his demeanor shifted, becoming shadowy and ravenous. He rose to his feet, bridging the gap that lay between us. Claire, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, tinged with hesitation. You linger in my thoughts, an unshakable presence. There's an undercurrent at play. His words coursed through me like a chilling breeze, stirring a tempest of emotions, guilt, shame, and an elusive sensation that lay hidden beneath the surface. I came to understand that this was a mistake, a boundary I ought never to breach. His piercing gaze and the proximity of his form rendered me utterly flustered. Jake, I murmured, this can't be real. That is incorrect. He shook his head, his eyes filled with a deep sense of desperation and yearning. I understand that it's not appropriate. Yet my emotions are spiraling beyond my grasp. Claire, you are the sole person who genuinely cares for me. You are the sole person who has ever made me feel valued. His words cut deep, sparking a torrent of guilt and shame within me. I understood that I must distance myself from him to declare that this could never come to fruition. I simply had no desire to do so. My desire for him burned as intensely as his longing for me. In a moment that felt both fleeting and eternal, I found myself reaching out, my fingers gliding along the contour of his jaw, gently caressing his face. Jake's breath hitched, and for a fleeting moment he stood still, his eyes fixed on mine. He leaned in and kissed me with a deliberate slowness that spoke volumes. It was far from an innocent kiss, the kind a son might bestow upon his mother. It was insatiable, pressing, overflowing with desire and anguish. He had bottled it up for what felt like an eternity, and in that moment I couldn't help but kiss him in return. In a fleeting moment all clarity slipped away from me. The presence of my son, the bond of my marriage, all fade away, leaving only the vivid sensation of his lips against mine. As he withdrew, we gasped for breath, our cheeks burning with an intoxicating blend of shame and longing. I longed to convey that this could never transpire again, yet the words remained lodged in my throat. I rushed to my room and forcefully closed the door, securing it with a firm lock. I reclined in bed throughout the night, my gaze fixed on the ceiling, attempting to persuade myself that it was merely an error, a transient lapse in strength that I could easily cast aside. Yet I have always been aware of the truth within. The kiss sparked a shadowy, perilous flame within me that I found impossible to extinguish. I wished to erase it from memory, yet beneath the surface I understood it was merely the beginning. In the days that followed that initial kiss, a tempest of guilt and confusion enveloped me. I evaded Jake at every opportunity, plunging into work and chores to keep myself occupied. Regardless of how chaotic my days became, he lingered in my thoughts. The memory of his lips against mine played on a loop in my thoughts, a striking echo of my previous choices and the desires that still lingered within me. Jake seemed to be caught in a conflict of emotions. He kept his distance, but I could feel his eyes on me whenever we occupied the same space. A palpable tension hung in the air, charged with an oppressive energy that enveloped us. Mark undoubtedly seized it. He possessed clarity of vision. He remained quiet, and I found myself too fearful to bring it up. On that fateful night, chaos erupted. Mark had departed for a work conference, leaving me to navigate the solitude of our home with only Jake for company. Throughout the day, we circled one another, each of us sidestepping the palpable tension that hung between us. As dusk settled in, the atmosphere thickened, teetering on the edge of an inevitable climax. I filled a glass with wine, yearning for its soothing embrace to ease my mind. As I lounged on the couch, my gaze drifted vacantly toward the television when Jake suddenly stormed into the room. Initially, he remained quiet. He remained motionless, his piercing blue eyes fixed intently upon me. Finally, he uttered a few words, his tone soft and hesitant. "Claire," he uttered, and the sound of my name on his lips sent a tremor through me. "Let us engage in conversation." I took a sip of my wine, calming my frayed nerves. "What is it concerning?" He stepped inside, his hands tucked deep within the confines of his pockets. "Can you believe it?" I was aware, yet I found myself unprepared to face it. "Jake, this is a terrible idea," I exclaimed, my voice trembling. "What transpired the other night? That was an error in judgment. We shall ensure it does not occur again." He shook his head, an expression of anguish etched across his features. "It was deliberate. It certainly was not. For what seems like an eternity, Claire, I've been feeling this way. Uncertainty lingered in my mind as I pondered the right words to express my thoughts. Our gazes met. In his presence, my heart quickens. Jake, you are my child. This is not accurate. I am not your son. He shouted, his voice rising in intensity. I do not belong to this family. You failed to mention me. We are not family, not in the truest sense. His words struck with the force of a gut punch. I felt the urge to contest his viewpoint and demonstrate his error, yet beneath the surface I recognized the truth in his words. Jake did not belong to me. He was a teenager we welcomed into our home, a boy who, by a twist of fate, wove himself into the fabric of our lives, not through lineage but through the bonds we formed. Nevertheless, it remained undeniable that our actions were fundamentally misguided. Jake, I implore you. I implored, my voice trembling. This is not occurring. That is unacceptable. He advanced, his eyes aflame with fervor. I am indifferent to the notions of right or wrong. My heart is filled with affection for you, Claire. I am convinced that your feelings for me are reciprocated. I attempted to voice my dissent, yet the words eluded me, for he was undeniably correct, straightforward and clear. I adored him. Not in the way a mother cherishes her son, but in the manner a woman adores a man. The moment of understanding coursed through me, sending a shiver along my spine. In an instant, Jake propelled himself toward me and pressed his lips against mine once more. This time, I remained in place. In a fleeting moment of bewilderment, I found myself crossing an uncharted boundary, my fingers entwined in his hair as the wine glass slipped from my grasp, shattering into 1,000 pieces on the floor. In that fleeting moment, all else dissolved into oblivion. This is not the union I envisioned, nor the principles I hold dear, nor the existence I have strived to build. Jake encompassed it all. What truly mattered was the way he made me feel. We ventured past the simple act of kissing. From that point onward, everything unraveled. In an instant, we found ourselves in my bedroom, garments scattered haphazardly around us. It was misguided, undeniably misguided, yet I found myself indifferent. After years, I finally felt vibrant and yearned for a longing that Mark hadn't ignited in me for ages. We found ourselves ensnared in a labyrinth of remorse, a realm from which there was no escape. We surrendered to emotions that we both recognized as perilous and misguided. Jake's head lay gently against my chest, his fingers gliding softly over my skin. I should have been consumed by guilt wrapped in shame. Yet all I felt was a peculiar tranquility. This doesn't change a thing, I said, attempting to offer comfort, though it was more for my own sake than his. This must not occur once more. Jake lifted his gaze to meet mine. His gaze was profound and captivating. It features Claire. It will persist endlessly. I yearned to contest his viewpoint and demonstrate his error, yet I found myself unable to do so. Deep down I understood he was right. This was not a singular mistake. A fresh chapter was unfolding, a transformative moment for each one of us. The days that followed that fateful night whirled into a chaotic whirlwind of hidden truths and heavy remorse. Throughout the day, Jake and I circled one another in a delicate dance. Maintained Mark's ignorance, offering no clues or inadvertent revelations. Yet, as night descended and the house embraced its stillness, while Mark lay in slumber, the silence transformed into a battleground where conscience clashed with temptation. Despite my awareness of its wrongness, I found myself unable to resist the temptation. Jake was a fixation, a compulsion that clung to me, impervious to my attempts to break free. Mark found himself utterly bewildered by the unfolding events. He remained blissfully unaware of the underlying tension that permeated the house. So absorbed in his tasks, he overlooked the silent communication between Jake and me as we shared knowing looks. No eyes were upon her. Cracks began to appear in the foundation of our marriage. Mark and I were once joined at the hip, yet now an insurmountable chasm stretches between us. I assured myself it was simply a fleeting moment. Normalcy would return the moment Jake departed the dwelling. Yet I was aware of the reality lurking beneath the surface. As the sun dipped below the horizon, an unmistakable change swept through the air. Mark hurried home from work, his complexion ashen and strained. The weight of the pressure bore down on him, and it was becoming increasingly apparent. As I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing dinner, he sauntered in and settled into a chair at the table. "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. My body went still, my heart pounding in my chest. Did he uncover the truth about Jake and me? Could this be the moment when everything unraveled? "Hello there?" I inquired, maintaining a calm tone. Mark let out a weary sigh, running his fingers through his tousled hair. "Hello, this is Jake. He's undoubtedly in a predicament." A wave of relief surged through me, only to be swiftly followed by a tide of guilt. "What are you referring to?" Today, Mark mentioned that he received a call from his school. He has been misbehaving, avoiding classes, and engaging in altercations. They hold a deep concern for his well-being. I furrowed my brow, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Jake exemplified the ideal student, composed, respectful, and consistently attentive. This was completely out of character for him. What prompted them to say that? Asked. Mark shook his head with fervor. Indeed, I think it connects to his past. He has faced considerable challenges moving from one foster home to another. He could simply be struggling to find his footing. I nodded, yet an unsettling sensation persisted, suggesting there was something deeper hidden beneath the surface. Jake's behavior has been peculiar of late, though I assumed it was merely a consequence of the affair. Could there be additional layers to this narrative? Later that night, after Mark had retired for the evening, I quietly entered Jake's room. He perched on the edge of the bed, his gaze locked onto the wall, a look of emptiness etched across his face. I settled beside him and offered his shoulder a comforting squeeze. "Hello, Jake. How are you doing?" Asked gently. "Your father provided me with details about the school. What is the reason behind this behavior?" He paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind as he considered his reply. In an instant, he pivoted to confront me. His eyes blazed with fury and sorrow. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice trembling. "I can no longer pretend when everything is crumbling around me." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" He leaped to his feet and began to pace the room restlessly. His fists clenched with intensity. "This is ripping me to shreds, Claire. I cherish you, yet I cannot continue to hide and deceive Mark in this manner. It feels unjust for both of us." A knot tightened in my throat. "Is that you, Jake?" His voice rose sharply as he interrupted me, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Silence from your end. You initiated this. That night, you pressed your lips against mine. You occupy my thoughts incessantly. That doesn't seem correct, Claire. That simply isn't fair." My eyes brimmed with tears as the weight of his words struck me. I initiated this endeavor. I ventured into territory that ought to have remained untouched. At this moment, Jake found himself confronting the repercussions of his actions. "I apologize," I murmured, my voice trembling. "It was never my intention to cause you pain." Jake paused in his restless movement, facing me with a gentler look in his eyes. "Regardless of your perspective, the events remain unchanged. At this moment, I find myself uncertain about the next steps to take." I took hold of his hand, gripping it firmly. "We can handle this, Jake. Unified. I have you well taken care of." As I uttered those words, it dawned on me that they carried no significance. There is no straightforward way to break free from this turmoil. The harm was beyond repair. I yearned for the possibility of mending our fractured bond, yet an unsettling sense of impending doom gnawed at my core. Following Jake's revelation, a tempest of suffering and regret engulfed everything. Mark exited the house, unable to bear the sight of either me or Jake. He initiated the divorce, and the proceedings unfolded with a swift and merciless efficiency. He relinquished the house and the money without a struggle. He wished for my departure, and truthfully, I couldn't fault him for it. On a chilly, overcast morning, the ultimate decree made its entrance. As I settled onto the cold floor of our vacant living room, my gaze fixated on the papers clutched tightly in my hands, an overwhelming sense of finality washed over me as if my existence had reached its conclusion. Jake struggled to regain his balance. He left school and found employment at a nearby grocery store, yet it was clear he was merely going through the motions. He scarcely uttered a word in my presence, and when he finally did, it was merely to vent his fury and cast the blame upon me for every misstep that occurred. "You have shattered my existence," he cried out into the darkness of the night. His voice trembled with fury. "You took away my chance at a normal life, a family that was meant for me to possess." I felt compelled to highlight his involvement in this matter, yet I understood that it would ultimately be in vain. I had broken his world apart. I came to understand, far too late, the profound impact my actions had on someone who once held the deepest trust in me, transforming our connection into a shadowy and ruinous affair. At that moment, we found ourselves confronting the repercussions together. One evening, as I was tidying up the attic, I came across a box filled with old photographs. They were fleeting glimpses of Mark and me from the nascent days of our union. In our youth, we basked in joy, utterly consumed by love, resting in stillness. As I sat on the floor, I turned the pages of the photos, tears cascading down my cheeks, memories of the life we once lived flooding back to me. In an unexpected turn, I stumbled upon a letter nestled at the bottom of the box. A note from Mark written in the aftermath of our wedding. He conveyed his affection for me, his enthusiasm to embark on our journey together, and his desire to age gracefully alongside me. As I continued to read, each line pierced my heart, leaving it in fragments. "Claire," he composed, "you are everything to me. Existence devoid of your presence? Inconceivable. I promise to love you, to hold you dear, and to remain loyal for all my days. A tempest of fury welled up inside me at his words, at the vows he uttered and subsequently broke. A deep, resonant sorrow enveloped me. Longing for the life that has slipped away, for the love that has fractured, for the selves we once embraced. I found myself adrift in the letter, surrounded by echoes of memories and the weight of pain. I carefully gathered everything and placed it back into the box, then pushed it into the dim corner of the attic, hidden from view. Yet I was aware that it would forever endure. A vivid recollection of my defeats, the decisions I embraced, the existence I once inhabited.